Hey, what's going on everyone? Today we are here at Zilker Botanical Gardens and we're going to be reviewing the all-new Sigma 105 2.8 macro lens. This is made exclusively for mirrorless full-frame cameras. We're here with Alyssa today, so let's get right into it. Back to my comment earlier about this lens being exclusively for mirrorless cameras. As some of you may know, some of the other Sigma Art lenses are adapted from DSLR lenses to fit with mirrorless systems. The way that you can tell is if they are made exclusively for mirrorless is in the actual text on the lens. So if it's DGDN, then that's going to give you an indication that's exclusively a mirrorless lens. The Sigma 105 2.8 aperture is able to open up to a 2.8, and it's going to be able to stop down to f/22. We do have a 62mm filter thread on the front element. It's going to weigh 710 grams if you're using the E-mount version, and then 715 grams if you're going to be using the L-mount version. It has 12 elements in 17 groups. It has a 9-bladed rounded aperture. Its minimum focusing distance is 11.6 inches, and it has a maximum magnification ratio of a 1:1. Some of the features on this lens, we're going to get an aperture ring, and you actually have a lever to lock it or to let it be free. Now, you can have the aperture clickable, but on the back side, we do have another lever to turn that to make it a smooth aperture. We're gonna have a programmable AFL button, and then we also are going to have an autofocus and manual focus switch. This lens is really good for portrait work as well as macro work, being a 105. The 2.8 aperture is gonna be able to give us that creamy depth of field if that's something we're going for. It's also going to compensate for the light loss when I'm putting on a teleconverter, which is another feature that this lens has. So with macro lenses, you typically don't see it, but if we look on the back of this, there's space in there for a teleconverter if you use Sigma's 1.4 and 2X. Another reason why I think this is going to be a perfect portrait lens is the focus limiter switch. So if I'm at 0.295 to 0.5 meters, I'm basically telling the lens that I'm going to be close focusing and I'm going to be up on my subject. So if there's anything in the background, it's not going to hunt for focus past that. And the inverse of that, if I'm doing portrait work, I'm not going to be as close to my subject, this being a 105, I'm going to actually have to back up. So the nice thing about that is now the lenses are going to try to focus on something in the foreground. So that's just going to be a really nice tool for when you're trying to switch between macro work and portrait work. Overall, I think this lens is going to hold up pretty well. They say it's made for, or the elements inside of it are really made for ghosting and flaring. So if you watched our 85 1.4 video, we were shooting in direct sunlight and we were still getting focus. And I feel like that's going to be the same with this 105. But that's enough for some of the specs and talking about it. We're actually going to shoot Alyssa and then we're going to actually do some macro work. So let's get right into it. Okay, so we just got finished shooting with the 105 2.8 macro by Sigma. So I'm gonna kind of tell you what I thought about this and the overall experience shooting with it. Overall, I really enjoyed this lens. For portraits, I felt like it was really sufficient, especially when I was using the autofocus limiter. That made a ton of difference, so it wasn't trying to hunt focus, but you know, with that minimum focusing distance and if the model was further away. And being at 105, the model did have to be kind of far away. There was some spots where I really wanted to get the shot, but 105 was a little too tight. So personal taste, I think 105's pretty in tight, but if you're outdoors, it should be fine. But it really handled doing portrait shots really nicely. Now let's talk about how to handle macro work. So first off, I'd just like to say, for you macro shooters out there, I commend y'all, because this stuff is really, really difficult. Even stopping down your aperture, that focusing plane is like so precise that I'm trying to shoot flowers out here and just a little movement stuff's going out of focus. So I commend y'all. But this at 105 and 11.6 inches and that 1-to-1 ratio, I was really able to get the shots that I was looking for. I was shooting some bees and some flowers, and then also some butterflies. And just, I was wowed by the sharpness of the photos and how this lens handled that. The only one downside, and the one downside I can really see to this lens, and this is maybe just a personal preference, but I felt like the manual focusing wasn't as precise as I wanted it to be. So when I was slowly racking it, I felt like it wasn't doing enough. So I kind of had to torque it a little bit more, and then it was jumping out of focus and was going too far. If this manual focus ring gets tweaked a little bit, I think it's going to be a even more killer lens. But that was the only problem I ran into when shooting in manual focus. But overall, this is a stellar lens. I think it is a great design. I think the weight is more than enough to handle, and all the features that you get externally and it being weather sealed, I just think it's a killer lens to have in your kit. Other than that, let us know what you think of this lens. If you have any tips on macro photography, drop them down below for me as well. If you have photos and you end up picking this lens, tag us in #PrecisionCameraATX. We'll see you on our next video. Like, share, subscribe.